Everyone, I understand there's a bit of a problem on the tube, so we might have a trickle of people joining us because come and sit in the front, you two. Yeah.
Gosh, I'm going to slide off this seat. You can slide it. Swing around as well. I know. I cannot promise not sliding off this seat.
Okay, folks? Good to go? Right, can I welcome you all to the Conduit? Those of you who have not been here before, this is a special place that brings together people who want to create change in society. So we call ourselves the change makers, and we work in collaboration with organizations and individuals who have a cause they feel strongly about and want to do something about. So I'm hoping as a result of tonight, we're all going to put our resources together and do something. So do keep in touch with us, contact us after the session if you want to do more. And my name is Arvinda Gohil, for those of you that don't know me. There's a lot of familiar faces here, so thank you all for coming out. And I sit on the board of the Conduit, but I also chair the Impact Committee, which is why I've decided I'm going to use this space to talk about something that I feel very passionate about, which is race equity. This is the beginning of a series of conversations that I'm going to curate over a period of time around equity generally, but today I'm starting with race equity. And I've got an amazing bunch of people here on the right who are going to help us with this conversation. I want to try and challenge the boundaries around this conversation as we go through the evening. So please do butt in, tell us what you're thinking, what you're doing, so that we can think and talk about what needs to be done now, because we are all struggling with making change around race equity. And some of us, myself included, have been doing this for at least 4 decades, and we see little change. So let's shift the dial once and for all. I'm not going to do the traditional thing about this is Phil, this is Wanda, this is Shani. No, I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by asking them a question which they can use as a way of introducing themselves. So, why are you here? Why did you agree to come? And why the hell are we still talking about race equity? Shani.
Shall I go first? Hello, everybody. Lots of friendly faces. Very good. So I have been, for the last 15 years, working and focusing on increasing representation in organisations. So I run a search firm called Cadence Partners, and as I say, I've been in executive search for over 25 years. That was informed by my early experience. So having spent 10 years working in spaces and search firms where I felt that the responsibility we had as gatekeepers often didn't ever come up. And when it did, it was shooed. It was not a big deal. It was not something that we should consider. And so when I set Cadence up, it was about representation. It was about understanding that if society was going to be a better place, then we needed to have people representing all of society in positions of power and in positions of influence. And so that's when Cadence was born. Now, 10 years, 15 years later, I'm looking around the room and I can see lots of faces of candidates that have done, that we've placed, that are doing amazing things, I can see lots of clients who are individually doing fantastic things. But in terms of why we're still here, well, it's not enough, is it, in terms of progress? And so I'm here to listen, I'm here to learn, I'm here to share some thoughts, and to make some new friends.
Thank you. Wanda?
Hi, I'm Dr. Wanda Wyporska, and I am around about a month into being Chief Executive of the Black Equity Organisation. And it's been one hell of a month. I think I can honestly say that. And the reason that I, at first, wasn't interested in the role, but then through a very comprehensive, I have to say, the longest recruitment ever in the history of humankind, which I think it deserved, to be quite honest, because Black Equity Organisation has been set up because people are tired of the fact that we are still here having these conversations and that we haven't scaled up and that we've been working and doing fantastic individual work, fantastic local work, fantastic community work. But through the past decades, black community organisations have been starved of funds, whether it's been in housing, whether it's been in violence against women, whether it's been in terms of black poverty. And so, you know, the ambition of the Black Equity Organisation is absolutely astronomical. And I say that with great trepidation and fear. But I know that we have a fantastic team behind that. But we have to have that ambition precisely because, you know, I've passed my half a century and I've been working on this stuff since I was at school, and we haven't seen that change. You know, if anything, we see more of what's actually happening, which I think is good. We have social media, we have reports, we have video, the things we didn't have in the 70s and the 80s, but we kind of knew what was going on. We just didn't have the proof and the evidence, and nobody was listening. Now, what I see a step change in is the fact that the evidence is there. We have the reports, and, you know, please don't get me wrong, I'm not a person who says, great, write a report and the revolution is over, because we know that reports never do that. But the fact that we have the institutions now recognising, some of them recognising, obviously we have to have another conversation with the Met, that there is institutional racism, that it exists, that this is not just about a few bad apples, that this is the way that systems and structures work, and there's a reason for that. And one of the things I want to really bring to this conversation is the fact that when we talk about race or racism, because those two things are different, we also need to be thinking about that intersectionality. Because my experience as a black woman is different to a black man's experience. My experience as a black disabled woman is different to my experience as a black woman. My experience as growing up in a working class family in the north of England in the 70s and 80s is very different, I can tell you, to my experience now living a more middle-class lifestyle in London. So, you know, this is not a set-in-stone issue. As we go through our lives, the fluidity of how we experience our lives and how we experience racism changes. You know, I now get to be discriminated against by a better, higher class of people. And I kid you not, you know, there is a very, very distinguished charity that, you know, I've had a very bad experience with that I could not tell you about. But it alarmed me because I thought, I'm just getting dissed by a higher class of person now. But, you know, is this progress? I don't think so. So the reason that I'm here is because I really think there is a moment here where if we come together, we can actually really shift that dial that Arvinda's been talking about, because there is a new consciousness. There's more of a sense of allyship. And if we think about class, if we think about the different protected characteristics and how we work together, not in one homogenous way, but as I always like to say, because I love crafts, like a mosaic. You know, all of our organisations and our individuals and our communities are these sort of bright jewels that we just need that grout underneath to bring them all together and to let them all shine. So that's basically why I'm here tonight. Thank you.
Thanks. Phil.
Thank you. Let me try and answer your question directly and talk about me secondary. Over coffee, I think it was Tracy said it feels as if we're going backwards. And I thought that was quite an interesting observation, and it's echoed for our previous two speakers. I'm not that pessimistic, actually, but I do take your point. And I think there's a rationale to the feeling of going backwards. and I think it's partly from a geopolitical perspective. For 15 years, post-2008, we've actually been in austerity. Nobody's talking about it. The average salary in the UK is 28k. There hasn't been a significant pay rise in either public or private sector, certainly within middle-ranking organisations during that time. By every measure, be it IMF, ONS, or any other study you'd want to know, social mobility has actually declined. Rickets has appeared in London streets. If you walk that way towards Chelsea and then walk that way towards Stratford, we know that the life chances of a lower middle-class child at the age of 10 is 10 years less. That difference within London. We're not even looking at globality here, just within the UK. So something significant is going on from an economic perspective, and various governments have made choices. These are choices. These aren't things that happen by chance. They are just choices. So I do take that point. The reason for turning up here was because Shani asked me, and Roselyn employed me in a company called PA Consulting and set me on the path to other things. So I'm surrounded by people who will squeeze me into certain positions. I ran Capgemini for 6 years in London. I'm currently chair of Roehampton University, and I'll talk a little bit about what I talk to students about, because I'm slightly more optimistic when I talk to students than necessarily my own peer group. And I also, because I've got obviously nothing else to do, sit on the board of English Cricket Board, which, as you know, has one or two challenges. So I take on Tracy's point. I do feel an element of stasis, both in terms of the discussion and in terms of action. But I think as we get on later on, I'd like to give some examples of things that I perceive that are actually quite positive. It is unlikely, given the comments I've just made, that a Prime Minister is going to make a statement that would make you proud. But I think there are certain things that are going on in businesses, and Roselyn will certainly have more to say to that, that I find quite constructive. In fact, what I see are businesses, they used to wait for Sir Keith Josephs and Maggie Thatcher, because I'm that old, to make a pronouncement. They would turn up at their meetings. CEOs of large organizations aren't doing that anymore. They're not waiting for governments to make decisions. They're just doing it for themselves. And that's where I see a pathway of opportunity and some positivity. So that's where I am.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry I'm late, but I work for McKinsey, and if anyone knows anything about that organization, I'm actually early. My name is Roselyn Cason-Marcus. I am the Global Director for Senior Hiring for McKinsey and Affinity. So my journey there, I have been there for 7 years. Phil and I were both at PA Consulting Group. I'm a subject matter expert in senior hiring. And why I'm here this evening is because I'm a warrior. I'm in the fight, but I'm a corporate warrior. And I know there are many different types, but I use my power to leverage all of the things that I really care about, affinity being one of them. I joined McKinsey. I was headhunted to McKinsey to lead all of partner hiring. And I did that role for 4 years up to the murder of George Floyd, and the firm then came out with a 10-action commitment to double Black leadership over the next 4 years before our 100th anniversary. And so I led a team that is exactly doing that, and have just now stepped into, we have been very successful at that, and they're like, great, we need you to do this for GLAM, for women, for it, and you know, the team is energized to do that, because I believe that if we solve for one, we solve for all. And whilst we have to be very intense in every group, and you can't throw underrepresented groups into a bucket, you need to look at what the challenges are that is distinctive. Even with Black and brown people, there are still hairs that are split with the with every community, there are still hairs that are split, and you have to understand what that is before you can make change. But what is exciting about the role that I have is that I'm looking at the executive level, and that's where transformation comes. When you can get more difference into the top of an organization, you start to see the kind of change that we're really looking for. The other thing that I spend a lot of time doing is talking to young people, because despite being cute, I'm actually quite old. And I want to incite young people into taking this. I literally start chats with them saying, I want you to take over Britain. And I did a talk for an organization on Friday, and I told the young people 3 things. I said, number 1, don't you dare buy a car before you buy a property, because wars are fought over land and resources, and Black people have been denied those for ages, so you must make sure that you do that as soon as possible. Also, you do not need sole work-life balance, you need work, and you need to pick the best paying job you can in whatever field that is, so that you can make a difference. And then thirdly, I said, think about the partner that you choose. There are builders and there are consumers. And, with respect, Barack Obama would not be president without Michelle. So you think about your vision as a power builder and who you need by your side. And so I'm out proselytizing to young people, because I think they are the future, and that's why I think we just have to keep pushing forward.
Thank you. I'm going to steal that line about cuteness and age. I think that's amazing. Okay, so we do want to focus this conversation down a bit into equity in the workplace, because this is a hefty subject, right? And we've only got an hour and a half. So I'm going to ask Shani a question, because Shani is a recruiter, as you've picked up. So she talks to lots of employers who are saying to her, I need to diversify my team, I understand the business case, I need you to find me these people. What's your take on the way employers are approaching this, and what's some of the learning you are able to share without giving away too many names?
Yeah, thank you. Well, there are very different approaches from different organisations. There are certainly, and in terms of, where we are right now, I think most organisations are at a point of realising that they ought to should do something. So that's a start. There are organisations that are thinking about what I would refer to as the low-hanging fruit. So the data understanding and baselining, understanding where the organisation is. Sometimes the organisations are asking the people of colour within the organisation and are engaging, or at least asking the question. But my observation is that for most organisations still, beyond looking at recruitment processes, beyond hiring, and of course my worry is that people hire Cadence because it's enough to say, well, we got Cadence in to do it. And so even if we put a very diverse slate up and they choose, the one person that isn't a person of colour on the slate, well, Cadence was there. So that's a worry of mine. I know you didn't ask that question, but that's an observation. I think what isn't happening, and my observations, is that organisations aren't doing the longer term work. They're not yet at a point of thinking about beyond recruitment and beyond identifying diverse individuals, diverse candidates, how are they supporting that person into an organisation?
Absolutely.
How are they readying themselves? It's still very much a deficit model. You know, let's give support to the individual person because obviously there's something wrong with them, rather than thinking about the responsibility as an organisation, rather than thinking about going deeper when it comes to accountability, going deeper when it comes to governance, going deeper when it comes to coaching and culture. So my observation is, and that's not to say that there aren't, you know, pockets of brilliance, and I'm happy to talk about some of those, and we're working with some of those organisations now, but I think, as we've all said, now is the time, because the problem is that my other observation is that candidates, their expectations has entirely changed in the last 2 or 3 years. And it's not just the black candidates, it's not just the brown candidates, it's also the candidates you want in the organisation that are white. It's those people that insist on being in an organisation that looks after and respects and gives equal opportunity to all. And so we get ourselves interviewed on the readiness of the organisation now. We get candidates asking us for those organisations to prove that they're ready for their candidacy, and that's different. That's happened in the last 2 or 3 years only.
Roselyn, I know you want to say something, but I want to go in the room. There are a couple of other recruiters. Ian, James, either of you would like to comment on this? Ian?
Yeah.
Do we have a mic? I should also say that we have got people online, so if there are any questions, somebody's going to wave at me. So please, Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Arvinda. Thank you. Everything you say resonates. So I run a couple of B corporations. One of them is called Roselyn, which is the oldest interim management company in the UK and an executive search firm, and the other firm is Trustees Unlimited, and we've, I think, bumped up against you once or twice in pitches and things. I've seen all sorts of good practice and bad practice. I must say I'm a bit of a cynic. You can't look at a TV advert these days and not see a black, brown or LGBT person, and you think, well, you know, is this authentic, is this sincere, or is it really just because we want to sell more hamburgers? So there's a cynical side to me. In the charity sector, where I've recruited lots of non-execs, I would say 80% of the people that come to us, the clients that come to us, want diversity. And the first question we always say is, well, why? And it's really interesting because some people have a really robust answer, and they will say something to the effect of, we realized we weren't doing very well here, we didn't even understand the issues, we didn't even know the questions to ask, we've brought in people from outside, we've done a really thorough audit, and this is our plan and this is where we're heading. Others will look at you like something caught in the headlights, and they won't even understand the question, and they won't know how to answer it. And we've had clients where we've pushed back and said, we refuse to work with you until you've done the hard work to figure this out. So if the question was preparedness, I would say some are very well prepared. A lot of them haven't got a clue. A lot of them is tokenism still. A lot of it is knee-jerk reactions because of how they're going to be perceived. I have to say, in the charity sector, it's as bad as it is in the commercial sector. And I've had Chatham House Rule, not going to mention any clients. I had a major national client funded by the Home Office say to the chair, you have to recruit someone diverse onto your board or we're going to pull, you know, the £100 million of funding. And the chair, because all of his mates were from Eton on the board, just didn't get it. So we had to form a cabal with the CEO and then get a couple of trustees on side and eventually made it happen. But that's one of several instances I can recall. So, sorry, that was a bit of a ramble and a bit of a rant all wrapped up.
James, do you want to comment?
No, thank you. Yes, I'm also a recruiter. Thanks for the invitation, Arvinda, to say something. And thank you, everybody, for such inspiring opening remarks. I think what's on my mind at the moment is organisational culture. So yes, it's about recruitment, but actually, what are you recruiting people into? What does it feel like to work there? Are there pockets of negative culture? If you recruit people with diverse characteristics, are they going to experience microaggressions? And a lot of microaggressions can be fantastically undermining. Are they going to get those casual remarks that make them feel that they doubt why they're there? So I do think employers need to think really carefully about their culture in every team within the organisation, in every office. What does it feel like? Is it welcoming? Is it diverse? If it isn't diverse, how can people be encouraged to welcome new colleagues who bring a diversity of thought? So culture is absolutely top of my list at the moment.
Thank you. There's a comment here.
Thank you to both recruiters because I'm Jo Larby. I run a exec coaching business called Inclusive Professions. My background is in legal. I'm speak in professional services. I was on a board. I work as a NED. And I know Shani, so thank you for the invite. But as I was listening to you talking, I think there is a real human cost here, which is about appointing diverse talent, particularly at senior level, into organisations, and then the organisation thinking job done. And I coach a lot of people who are black people who are very damaged as a result of that, in that they go in and the organisation isn't ready and hasn't done the work. So today's a short session, and I'm not going to go into detail, but I really do think it's something that we really, really need to start majoring on, because there's no point in bringing people in and well, it works for the recruiters, no disrespect, bringing people in and then losing them within 9 months to 18 months.
Yeah. Can I just respond to that point that Jo just made? Because, of course, I am a product of this, and an expert, a lived expert of the thing that I consult on. And so whilst it is, good for business, the trauma that I see is a trauma that I experience as somebody that absolutely understands the cost of that. And there is, and as I say, the candidates understand that cost too.
Roselyn, did you want to comment?
Yes, I just wanted to say that we have to hold the government and organizations accountable, whether it's your organization or not, where you bank. We are all stakeholders in Britain, and we need to use whatever power and influence and leverage we have to challenge the CEOs, to challenge the boards, to ask why that organization is still, 100% male members from Eton, when if the government's put money into it, so have all of us. So I think they're like the activist spirit, and that's whether you are in academia, McKinsey, wherever you are, asking questions. It's like, why don't we have any black graduates? Why do people keep leaving? We have to interrogate the systems. And we also need to challenge wherever we are to ensure that they have an infrastructure, to your point, that is about retention and advancement. Because I don't want to just come to your organization. I want to be the person that you're thinking about for your next CEO or your next CFO or whatever that role is. And I do, in my coaching role, I do ask people, I said, make sure you ask better questions of the organization. Make sure you ask to see diverse people who are in senior roles and ask them their experience of the organization. Please do not just look at this in terms of the compensation, but look at it in terms of, even when I'm meeting people, I'll open the board of directors and look and see what does that look like now, and we can ask questions. I think we have to stop being passive around this and talking amongst ourselves and join things like the BEO. We have civil rights organizations that we should be a part of in this country if we see things that we don't like.
Thank you. Wanda, and then Phil.
Okay, thanks. So I think I'm going to pose a bit of a challenge to some of the things that have been said. So Phil, you were talking about sort of austerity come 2008, but I've been thinking about things in terms of what's happened over the past 30 years, given the fact that we're 30 years on from the murder of Stephen Lawrence.
And, if we're thinking about race equality, in terms of disproportionality, whether it's in the criminal justice system, whether it's differential outcomes in maternity services, across a whole raft of areas, they were prevalent before 2008 as well. So I'm trying not to be too cynical, but I think that what's ended up happening is that there's almost been like a fetishization of representation. So
what does that mean?
So in the sense that we've had Barack Obama, we've got a person of colour as a Prime Minister in this country, Scottish leader now is a person of colour. You will have people, I'm the CEO of the charity that I work for, but what that ends up doing is allowing organisations and institutions not to focus on institutional and systemic discrimination, which is about policy, it's about procedures, it's about outcomes, and instead the easy option is to get a few black and brown faces into high office or across an organisation. But of course you're not going to be able to retain them because you're essentially just sending black and brown people into a burning house. House is still on fire. And so I think what it feels like over the past 5-10 years in particular, around the whole DEI agenda, is that the narrative has changed from institutionalised or systemic racism to diversity. Now, when we talk about things in terms of diversity, you take them out of a legislative framework and you just talk about, it completely changes the shape of things and you personalise it to the individual. So an organisation might do unconscious bias training. They may do, have these small things that people put in place. It's so how is this addressing the systemic issues that are prevalent in your organisations and that the outcomes still remain the same? So it feels that there's been quite a skewed focus and it's the easy options that we've gone for.
It's a very good challenge, Wanda.
Yeah, and I think in my previous life as Executive Director at the Equality Trust, I would have been saying a lot of what Phil was saying, and these two things actually bridge in the whole concept of inequality, because we know in terms of economic inequality, inequality in this country has increased. We know that this feeds into the fact that if you have high levels of inequality, you also have higher levels of poor mental health, poor educational attainment, poor physical health, more incarceration, more homicides, all of the areas, more violence, all of the areas where many brilliant organisations are doing a very good job, but in a siloed way without linking all of that up. Now that links into the issue of poverty, and this is why I would always say think about inequality, not just poverty. Now that has political consequences because people are quite happy to think about poverty because it's something over there and it can be solved apparently. I haven't seen that in my lifetime and in a couple of 100 years, but just as Phil said, we are in a situation where we have had the biggest stagnation in wages since the Napoleonic era, and that has an impact. If you are constantly, throughout generations, more and more economically depressed and deprived, that has a cumulative effect, and that is coming out, as we see so desperately, in health inequalities, as you mentioned, maternal outcomes, which is something that is very, it's something very close to my heart, and I know to the team at BEO. And that brings me to the fact that, one of the reasons that BEO was created was because we have to look at the systemic issues. It's not about, let's do a couple of DEI programs and say we've got our affinity groups and whatever, and we have, as, we will quite crudely say, black faces in high places. It's not enough because we can't make the assumption that we're all homogenous and we all want the same things. Just because somebody who looks like me is in a position of power doesn't mean they're going to want the same things that I do. And again, we have to intersect this with class and with a whole experience. We can have a lot of black and brown people in the cabinet, but if they've all been to Eton or Winchester or, somewhere else, that's not going to really change things. So we have to think about this at that systemic level and go right back. This is why, again, we were set up to be an intergenerational, long-term organisation because we're not going to do this quickly.
Thanks,
if we look at the systemic issues.
Thank you. Phil?
Yes,
and then I'm going to go to Patricia after that.
Okay, thank you. I just want to grab hold of a couple of strands, if I may. So hold the front page. There's some organisations that don't want to change and are not going to change and don't want diversity and don't value it. So we just need to grab that fact. But here's a surprise. There are some interesting things going on out there. I want to pick up your point about the ads on television if you go home tonight. And 20 years ago, I wasn't on television, apart from being a crook or a policeman. And now tonight, if I go on an ad, I see people look like me going on holiday, driving children around, driving cars. And I think it's a good thing. I was in M&C Saatchi last week, talking to them about the criticism they're getting for putting those ads on television. M&C is super smart. They don't follow trends, they set them. They've done the maths. It works. They make money. They've read the McKinsey report. Diversity works. It builds shareholder value. Diverse businesses make more money, the bottom line, than non-diverse. It's a fact. The problem with this debate is it becomes, we've got to change the culture. It's institution. And it is far more complex than that. And another time and another place, I'll bore you with definitions of race, which are a construct, as opposed to a fact. There isn't an anthropologist that will sit here and talk about race the way we're talking about race. But that's a debate, perhaps, for another time. The point that Roselyn, I think, is making far better than I am, that every diverse person I know is doing very well, thank you very much. They're running companies. They're sending their kids to great universities. It's not a Daily Mail story, but they're doing quite well. There's a burgeoning middle class, diverse middle class in this country, and particularly in America. So that's just a fact. Another fact. Ernst & Young produced a report. There are more diverse companies set up by individuals between 18 and 30 than ever before. But what's beginning to happen is people that look like us, we're just doing stuff. We're not waiting for the announcement. We're not waiting for the culture change. We're not waiting for definitions of an institution that has changed, because I'll be long dead. We're just getting on with stuff. We're just doing stuff. In my organization, all the executives mentor 3 or 4 students into the world of work. That's what we do. And of course, guess what? They've set up, and now 3 or 4 years later, a little alumni group, and they're helping each other into the world of work. Who does that alumni work better than anybody in the world? McKinsey. They've written the book on it. They know how to do that stuff around helping one another. So there's something about individual responsibility, which I think we're representing here, and also something, I mean, what I refuse to do, since I'm probably the oldest person in the room, is wait for that defining moment. People say it was, or it, you know, I don't want to wait. I mean, I was at school when Rosa Parks was kicked off the bus. Yeah, that was my defining moment. I was at school at the time. So I'm not waiting for another defining moment. I'm just getting on with stuff. But recognizing there are institutions and people that don't want this change. That's a fact. We live with it, and guess what? We get on with it.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got a few people in the audience. I know, Shani, you're desperate to say something, but I'm going to go to Patricia, and then you.
Hi, everyone. I did host some time ago now an event in this very space with the wonderful Eric Collins. And one of the facts that came out from that conversation, which it drives me and pains my heart, and was just confirmed in recent reporting, was that 1 in 2 Black children in this country live in poverty. So that's my fact, okay? That just drives me and makes me focus on what we're talking about here today. I left the corporate world more than 10 years ago now to go into lovely impact and social investing and all of that. But when I talk to my friends in the corporate world, as of this moment, while there is a focus on gender pay gap reporting, there is no commitment to ethnic pay gap reporting, and that most of the DEI managers, specialists, who were tasked in the post-George Floyd era to look at these issues that we're all talking about, they're all being let go. It's being rolled back right now as we speak. So I listen to you, Phil, about your optimism and sort of, but I look at what's going on, and I'm not that optimistic, because I just see people are not necessarily invested, fully invested, corporates particularly, in this space. They are doing what is easy, they are doing what is, convenient, but they're not doing the hard work that some of us have talked about. And I think we, as a community of committed social change makers, we need to be really doubling down on our side to make that change happen. So
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can you wait? No.
It's a very small point.
Okay.
A very small point. One of the things that I am a little bit worried about, and it speaks to the point about the adverts that I see myself represented selling cars and the like gravy. But the other thing that is worrying, which is a worrying pattern in the last few years, is the commercialisation of diversity. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday who's a brilliant EDI consultant that works as an associate for Cadence, who said, you know what's just happened? I've just had a very significant advertising agency contact me because they've just sold lots of EDI programmatic work to the tune of hundreds of thousands of pounds to a big corporate, and now they want me to come in and tell them what to do. Right? So for chump change, exactly. And so that's the commercialisation and that low-hanging fruit and people earning once again is the thing that...
Thank you.
So I couldn't wait, sorry.
Hi, thank you. My name's Joanne Anderson. I'm Mayor of Liverpool for another couple of weeks, and I'm the first black woman to be a directly elected mayor in a core city in the UK. It's been a nightmare. It's been an absolute nightmare. But in terms... It was 19 women who took office in Texas that encouraged me to stand up and go for mayor. I have not made one dent in that political arena. When I stand down in a couple of weeks, it will go back to normal of white men taking those positions. I have made a dent within the organisation. I've driven equality, but I've been an equality and diversity and inclusion consultant for 30 years, and I'm so tired. I'm so tired of the things that we're saying. I'm so tired of being here before. So I am actually with Phil. I think we need to do it for ourselves. I think we need to mentor black children. I think we need to use our influence and power to get money to black businesses. I think we absolutely need to do it for ourselves because I'm tired of asking for change or trying to show the way with change or people trying to exploit me for what I know. I just want to do it for ourselves. So I am definitely with Phil. I'm not sure you were given exactly the same message, Phil, but I'm definitely with you.
I'm coming to Liverpool.
Yeah, definitely with you on, support our children getting into business and use our leverage that we have got to support other black people.
Thank you. In the front.
Hi, my name's Lynette. I'm the Director of People and Culture at Refuge and one of Shani and Cadence's successors. And I suppose my question goes back to James and Ian and Shani. So where you have these examples of organisations where you think ultimately it's lip service in terms of what they want to do around diversity, what are you within your organisations as recruiters trying to do to change some of those attitudes? Are you still partnering with these people and delivering the outcomes because there's a business bottom line for you? Or are you having the serious and difficult conversations around what does this really mean for you and how are you going to create an environment that's going to embrace and support diverse people coming into these organisations?
Thank you. So I've got lots of people in the audience, and I know the panel is desperate to say something as well. So, Wanda, do you want to go next?
Shall I?
Yeah, I was just going to say after Shani's responded to that, and I will give Ian and James an opportunity if you want to. Yeah. But Shani, first.
So we've, like Ian, we've walked away from organisations that we felt were, they would be harmful spaces. But I think, in all honesty, again, being a product of this environment where Cadence and a black-owned business, we're expected to work 10 times as hard for, half the price, I don't always get that commercial opportunity, if I'm completely honest. And so what we'll do instead is we'll work with those organisations as best we can. We will make sure that there is a system and a structure around the candidate if we're placing that candidate, but we'll also be really honest and candid with candidates. So I won't look at people, but there are people in this audience now who, having had really frank conversations with me about the environment they were entering into, we made sure they were ready, but also that they had a system. We've got Joe as a coach, who is one of my go-tos in terms of a support network. But, in terms of having if I'm completely frank, having the opportunity to walk away from dozens of clients, and that's what it would be, we're not yet there yet as a black-owned business, if I'm honest.
Okay. Do you want to come back? Yes?
I wanted to say,
Wanda?
from my perspective, I'm always trying to get black and brown people into jobs. And if we have to coach you around that, but I want you in these spaces, because I go back to my original assumption. If you are somewhere with power, money buys generational wealth for people. And, I coach young people about that too. We were working on a project in Detroit, and the salary for the analyst would be more than the combined salary of, both parents. And I said, you must take these jobs. And they're like, I'm scared of McKinsey. It's like, don't worry about being scared. You must take this job because you can now help your family. And they asked that question about, what about work-life balance? I said, there is no work-life balance, but you're working for a higher order. My point about this is we have got to get in the spaces to make the change. That's why I started saying I'm a corporate warrior. And I know that people are tired, and if people are tired, then yes, rest, come out of it. But I will always encourage people to go into the spaces that feel hostile, that are different, because you know what you're gonna find there as well, and we haven't talked about this, allies.
Yeah.
I've only worked in white organizations, right? But you know what? I have had the most amazing allies that put my name in the room, that said she's the right person for that job. So please, let's also remember that we have to do this work together. This isn't one group trying to do something. This is all of us trying to work together for a change for our country, for our organizations.
And our people.
Absolutely.
There are three things that come out of that. I'll come back to you. One is about, can you see yourself in that organization? And often, because you don't see people like you in that organization, you can't see yourself in that organization. But also, this work-life balance is just rubbish, right? So, anybody who has done executive roles in terms of people of color know that actually you have to go the extra 100 miles in order to prove that you can do the job, right? But the third thing is, which I hear a lot, is around fit. How many times have people come back to you because you haven't got a job and they've said, the fit's not quite right? What the hell does that mean? Does that mean I've got to become like you to fit? So those are the kinds of things that we really need to start to challenge, I think. Yeah? Wanda, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to take the recruitment conversation back to the actual candidates, because we've talked a lot about it from the recruiter's perspective. And, there are recruiters in this room that I've had a marvellous experience with. There are recruiters who are probably not in this room that I've had absolute terrible experiences with. You're on the list because they need someone black. And hey, I'm a black woman, double whammy. And it comes back to the point of the glass cliff, that when an organisation is really in trouble, they've got nothing to lose, so why not hire someone black or brown? And then when you've stabilised the organisation, then they can hand it off to someone else. And I think we have to also, I absolutely hear what you're saying, but what I want to say as well is that whatever role we go into, we are always the black person doing the role. So I'm running an organisation, now at BEO it's a different matter because that is all about black equity, but in every other role I was the chief executive, and then my second role was I was the black woman chief executive. and asked to go to those events and not remunerated and expected to share my expertise because it was so important for the organisation, but they didn't quite have a budget for it. You know, these people know who they are. So I think we do need to think about the candidates as well, because we know, you know, when we're being put on a list. And I want to come back to self-care, because I think this is really important. Because yes, there are some of us who are quite happy to go into the spaces and be those pioneers. And by the way, I don't agree with if you can't see it, you can't be it, because we would be nothing if that were the case. We have to have these pioneers. But you don't always have to do that. And what I always want to say to people is, it's your choice. You don't have to take this role on. You don't have to be a great fighter who is constantly doing this. You can just do your job like any white person would be doing. You know, so really think about it. And if you don't want to do this and you just want to do your job like a normal person, I use normal in inverted commas, then just do your job. If you're up for the fight and you're willing to go into those spaces and create change, then do it. But don't feel you have to. And that's very, very important.
Phil, did you want to come in? I know there's several questions or comments waiting.
These guys are far more important than us.
Jocelyn, then here, and then there. Jocelyn's here. She's been waiting patiently. Here, on the...
Yeah, my question is coming from a slightly different angle, but very much in the present context. And in terms of what you have explored and the issues that you have raised, I'm interested to know what you think in the present context of the situation that the first black woman parliament, MP, is in now, in terms of us unpacking and better understanding, because these complex issues are things that we have to understand, because she isn't just some innocuous person. She was very much somebody who fought around a whole plethora of different issues. And I'm not standing in the... Yes. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Some people might not know, Jocelyn.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. And in that context, I'm not particularly defending her. I'm just saying that these are the kind of complex political issues that we can either walk away from or we can actually open up and discuss, because the complexities are what we are engaged in when we engage with the intersectionality of the lives that we live in today.
Thank you. I'm going to take all, and then we'll come back.
Hi, I'm Tracy Jolliffe. I'm in my day job, I am an activist. I work for the NHS. So I'm going to speak from the perspective of being a black woman, because I can't speak from anybody else's perspective. But I'm listening to this debate and I'm thinking about the things that my mother used to say to me, like you have to work twice as hard, 4 times as hard, whatever that saying is that our mothers used to say to us, you know, it's embedded. And what I see in organisations is the black people working twice as hard, 3 times as hard, 5 times as hard. And I think we have to change the narrative. We have to take hold of the narrative and name the things that are important for us. Because if organisations are doing what you're saying, Shani, about cherry picking, and I've known many through procurement, many white-led organisations that want to win diversity contracts, and they go and find a brown person to come and deliver the contract because they haven't got the knowledge, capabilities or skills. And I see the diversity game being played out in terms of representation, which is a con. Because actually, I'm not interested in representation. I'm interested in people who understand how to lead for racial justice in those positions. And that's not what's being recruited for. So there's something for me about working in the space of leadership development where I see leaders at all levels who really don't have a clue about how to lead for justice. They haven't got mindsets that would take them there. They don't know what the behaviours are that they need to be embodying or displaying, and they most certainly don't know what strategies they need to be enacting in order to create change. without the language as a toolbox, it's not going to go anywhere. If they can't talk about the subject, they can't change it.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Matu. I work in the investment sector and don't have decades of experience in fighting race inequality. I really struggle with the comments around work-life balance. And I'm saying this as someone who has no work-life balance. I'm definitely fall on the end where I have no work-life balance because I have a team full of women of color. And I feel like by telling them they aren't allowed to have this work-life balance, we are prohibiting the choices they can make in the rest of their lives. I feel really uncomfortable when I can't say things like, oh, you have a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, you have to take care of someone that's older. And when we think about that intersectionality, it's the work-life balance that allows people from different intersections to really flourish in corporate environments. And so when we're not changing the conversation about work-life balance into how do we actually manage for that, I think we're really limiting who are Black and brown people can move that way.
Just to be clear, I was talking to students. I think for anyone else, it's a choice.
Yeah.
Right? So please don't take away that I was saying there is no work-life balance. I was talking to students.
Yeah, okay, Shani.
Yeah, and I know I didn't say that about the comments about work-life balance, but one of the things we've been doing at Cadence over the course of the last couple of years, because the number of candidates that have come to me and to the rest of the team and talked about burnout, have talked about complete exhaustion because they are the Black person in the organisation, the person of colour, and therefore they're expected not just to do their job and represent their own opinions, but are expected to represent an entire, not even people's, but community. So what we've been doing is creating support structures. And I know that in terms of some of the softer things that people are talking about, it's a lower hanging fruit in terms of these affinity networks. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about spaces where you can actually practically say, what do you need? What
Thanks.
do you need and how can I help?
Thanks, Shani. I'm going to take that. Yes.
Yeah, so some of the things that have been coming up around like representation and sort of kind of trying to, I guess, play the game but like win it as Black and brown people. I think what the quote that keeps coming up for me is Audre Lorde, master's tools can't dismantle the master's house. And I think there's something about how we resist playing into these systems through, resist giving into capitalism, because that's not going to liberate us. That's gonna, maybe give us higher positions, higher paid positions, but that's not going to free us. We're just going to be reproducing the same systems that continue to perpetuate harms caused particularly against Black and brown people. And so I think sometimes in these conversations, we kind of think within the boxes that have been created for us and created by things like white supremacy and capitalism and patriarchy and all of that stuff, but we're not thinking about what can exist outside of that and beyond that, and trying to create radical futures that aren't dependent on, exhausting ourselves through labor and having to fight every day. Like that to me doesn't feel like liberation. Like that to me doesn't feel like the future that I want to live in, like where I have to constantly fight. And so how do we sort of challenge and change our perspectives to be able to create new ways of I guess existing that isn't just perpetuating the structures and the tools that are currently being used?
Hello, good evening everyone. My name is Claudia Aiton. I am a Chief People Officer within the NHS through the lovely Shani once again. And I am in the fortunate position of having an opportunity to do something about EDI and anti-racism within the organization that I work. I am firm in the view that it needs to be embedded within the strategic objectives of the organization that we're working for. It needs to be the reason why we deliver patient care better, without the abuse, without the absences, without all those things. That we can draw a line between making the racism less prevalent in the organization and successful outcomes within the organization. And I'm wondering, while I sit here and firm in that conviction, if the panel has any examples, any stories of organizations that you think have gone beyond the performative piece that have been referred to so often this evening. Appointments to positions that look good, or people who front things, but and really paying a disproportionate level of attention to the recruitment piece, as opposed to what happens to all the processes in the depths of the organization. Do you have any stories, any success stories of organizations that have done that you can share?
Thank you. Phil, do you want to go first on that one? No? Okay. Roselyn, you'll have some good stories.
Well, I would have to say, I was hoping you'd ask me, but I think McKinsey, within the construct of what it is, we have given away $200 million in free teaching, learning. We've given away millions to social enterprises. We helped to set up BEO through Dame Vivian Hunt. I'm sitting here. I had a job for 2 years that had Black in front of it, right? I was head of Black senior hiring and retention. So I think there were similar people doing the work around women, et cetera. So I do think that we have tried to walk the talk. Now, it's a 46,000 person organization, so it's not perfect. And I want to also comment on what this lady said. We absolutely do not have to be in these spaces. I think everyone makes a choice, right? You can be an entrepreneur. Going back to I'm a corporate warrior, so I leverage McKinsey for the things that I care about. Why? Because people care what McKinsey thinks. So I use that platform, but people don't have to be in the kind of environment I am to do that.
Okay. I do want to shift the conversation, because we've not got much time left, towards what we could be doing, what change we could be creating. I know, Ian, you want to come in, but we're just running out of time. So what I would like is for the panel to think of where we could be in a decade. I would really like to see this in my lifetime. I really would. So what's going to happen in 10 years' time where we could all be sitting here again and celebrating the change? Who wants to go first?
Wanda, surely.
I'll be very quick. I think young people are going to change the narrative. They have no interest in the things that we have talked about for years. They're like, I don't care. I'll have the friends I have. I'll be the person I want to be. And I think that they will, because they will be the people in 10 years who actually have the money and have the resources and have already decided that this isn't a world that they want for themselves. So I think it's going to be the young people that change it.
Okay, I'll go very quickly then, so that Phil and Wanda can...
It's got a bit of time to think.
It goes back to, Claudia, your point about performative gestures. In 10 years' time, what we need to happen now, in order that there is progress in 10 years' time, is that each one of us in this room and beyond is thinking not just about your corporate employment in itself and what you can be doing, and there are loads of things that organisations aren't doing. I don't know whether they're in the room, but there are large corporates that are insisting on ripping up their current PSLs and their supplier networks and making sure that they are working with and partnering with black-owned and brown-owned organisations. So, they are thinking about their spend and they're thinking about where that money goes. There are, obviously, there are opportunities for us all to think about mentoring, but also look at the people that are in this room. I'm thinking about the opportunities for connection, for collaboration, this work takes investment. So the first thing, the people that I have fired in terms of organisations are the organisations that say we need entire systemic change of our culture and organisation. Shani, I've got £15,000. So, you know, if your budget is small, it is still possible to do something, but it's going to need creativity, innovation, and also partnership. And there are plenty of organisations and people out there. I can connect you if you would like, that would be, you know, would love to do that work, including, obviously, the Conduit.
Yeah, can I pick up the question that wasn't answered around Diane Abbott, if I may? Being black is not an excuse. She's wrong, wrong, wrong. And that's it. And hopefully we won't have anybody else saying something dumb like that, because it's wrong. There's no, actually, you can't wiggle around anything she said. It's just wrong, full stop. In terms of the question, I agree with Roselyn. We keep agreeing, I don't know why. What I'm seeing with, I'm quite optimistic with what I'm seeing with students. I spend a lot of time at university helping, something called student pathways, helping students into the world of work, because if you've got a 50 grand debt, it's, you know, I know it's not all about a job, but if you've got 50 grand debt, you know, having the opportunity to get some sort of engagement is, you know. I'm seeing students sitting, and I mentor somebody who works at Goldman, sitting in the foyer of a large organisation, just to get the vibe. And if the vibe doesn't feel right, what I mean by that, there wasn't anybody walking in there that looked like me, they'll go and get something different. Now, my generation, when we got a job, it was yippee, stay there 40 years, get a pension, move on. There are a generation now that's saying, actually, you know, I'll work for a couple of years and then I fancy a bit of travel, and we know from the stats that I'm going to have 6 jobs in my lifetime. So I'm going to do what I fancy doing, and you're seeing new businesses set up, new diverse business set up in London. It's booming in the SME sector. And just before you think that, you know, UK business is all about sort of, I don't know, a large pharma or Shell or BP or whatever, 75% of UK business are SME. 75% of business employ 10 people or less. So that's where the growth is. And if Sunak was here, he'd be telling him precisely, that's where the growth is. That's where the focus would be if it's there's some political whim. But I want to conclude with Roselyn's point about being a warrior. I don't think I have any choice. That's my job. I just don't think I have any choice in terms of turning up at work with my Savile Row suit, with being fully prepared. It took me a year at the university to get rid of BAME. I don't know any black person that likes a term. Don't know any Asian person that likes a term. And I have 2 degrees, and I don't know what minority ethnic means. But it took, and so the language bit is part of the challenge, in addition to everything else, in terms of employment, that we have to take on. It might link to the culture point earlier on. But if we're using nonsense language, it hidebounds any progression that we want to make. As I said at the very beginning, when we have another one of these, we'll unpick the concepts of race, which were, you know, constructed in the 1830s by a guy called Blumenbach, which is another story. And so you get not only the challenges that Roselyn alluded to in terms of getting out there, taking on the right and doing stuff, but also fighting through the language and all the other stuff as well. So I'm cautiously optimistic about the young generation who are just doing stuff for themselves. They're not waiting for the change of culture, or they're not waiting for the institution to change. They might have to apply for twice as many jobs as their counterparts, but that's precisely what they're doing.
Wanda, are you ready?
I'm ready now. Sorry, such a long wait. I absolutely take the point on language as a linguist myself, and as someone who is an ethnic minority in being black, but also being Polish. So when you say ethnic minority, do you mean my Bajan? Do you mean my Polish? Do you mean my Devon? You know, if I'm in Cornwall. Bajan. Yeah, it's a Bajan mafia. But I want to come back to the point, which is the points being made here. I have to say that I feel that we have a very optimistic view of younger people, and this is based very much on middle-class younger people who have those options, who are going to university. What I see from some of the projects and areas that, working with young people is something very close to my heart, is that there is a sense, and, this goes back to Henry Louis Gates and people and Cornell and everybody saying, there is a sense of depression and despondency in our communities because we are now into 3 or 4 generations of really poor housing, poor education, all of the challenges that we know for our young people. And it's no surprise that our young people are sitting there saying, oh, well, I might become a personal trainer, or I might, if they're thinking about work. And I think we can't forget that. If we think about the demographics, the mixed population is a population that's increasing. It's young Africans as well. And what we have to look at is those unemployment rates, and we have to look at the housing. If you're growing up, in a house with 2 bedrooms and you've got 3 or 4 brothers and sisters and you're not able to do your homework, that's where it starts. We know that poor children, more deprived children, can start school at 5, up to 18 months behind their richer counterparts. So we have to start at that level, and we have to, even before birth. So we have to, for me, the most important thing is that we can stem economic inequality, because it impacts on everything else. If we continue to see inequality rise as we're seeing, the UK and the US are poster children for economic inequality, then all of those bad things will continue to happen. And you know what? They happen disproportionately to our communities. So if we don't do that, if we can take measures, and we know what the measures are that we need to do to reduce inequality, they are out there, they're being practiced by various countries in the world, then that supports all of us. Because we know when the economy is bad, racism increases.
Thank you.
We do need to, sorry.
We need to
Can I
finish
just make
very
one...
soon, and I know one or two people are still wanting to say something, but go on, Phil.
I just wanted to pick up, we do need a bit of academic rigour around the inequalities you're talking about. The lowest performing educational group in the UK are white working class boys. And so we do need, and that's why I meant about language and getting the rigour of research into some of the conversations.
But
otherwise we do odd things. Yeah?
As I said, this is a hefty subject. We're not going to solve it in an hour and a half. So,
Sorry, I'd just like to say I led an inequality organisation for 5 years. I have a doctorate. I'm very well aware of academic rigour. and I'm not saying that's not the most... That isn't true. It is.
By all the research.
I was hoping we could actually...
I wasn't saying that wasn't...
Oh, to Southampton.
Can you carry on afterwards?
It's important to put it in the mix.
I was really hoping we could actually do a bit more of a kind of, what it could look like in the future, rather than continue to talk about how awful it is, which of course it is. But I know, Sean, you want to say something, so I'm going to give you... Yeah.
Hello, everybody. My name's Sean. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Conduit. First of all, this is brilliant, and I've really enjoyed it. But I'd like to just share a perspective that's quite personal from me. So I'm gay, and as I grew up rising through work and those things, I was one of those people that felt that if they found out that I was at an interview, I might not get hired. If I was there and they found out, I would have all sorts of stuff. So I kind of lived through some of that, certainly not through the lens that you have. But I want to say something that 3 years ago, I set about to build another company called Remote Year. It was a group travel company, which harnessed the power of remote work and group travel and taking people around the world. And I want to talk about a lens that there is some positivity, because you mentioned a couple of things, which was an ally. And as a CEO of that company, I had the fortunate and the unfortunate piece of working for a large group where the CEO had no understanding of what he might say and how it might offend, and didn't understand that, didn't mean it in his words, but the effects were huge. And you could see that in the organization. And when I started Remote Year, I started with 2 people of color, and I started with a transgender person. And we said, we're going to build this from scratch, and we're going to focus. And it was really hard, but 2 years later, we were 380 people with just over 20 million revenue, with 50-50 gender, 47% people of color, 41 nationalities, but more importantly, with a customer base, there was 52% people of color. And I can tell you that it's not just hard to build that, it's hard to cope with, because you can over-index in some ways on what others might perceive as you pushing too hard. And we had to build programs on a month-by-month basis of different speakers and different talks. And about 12 months in, we hit a wall where the non-people of color, let's say the white people, raised and said, we're finding this so difficult because we're kind of fearing the conversation. We don't know how to have the conversation. And then we had to work backwards on how we could have conversations. So it is really possible. And my last comment is, I know for so many of you, you're a generation of warriors that have started the change. And for me, I feel positive about it. I think there is a future. But don't,
Thanks, Sean. Thanks.
just want to say, even if you're tired, please don't be, because your role modeling and fight is what keeps it inspired. And I know how hard that can be, but I just want you to carry on.
Thanks. Okay, just to finish, in a minute, just 1 minute, each of you say what you think we can do right now that's going to shift the dial. Whoever wants to go first.
I'll be quicker than that. I think that we need to organize and work together, stop working in silos. Yeah, we have a lot of common purpose. Rather than the things that divide us, let's find the things that bring us together, and then let's push governments, organizations, etc., toward that. You know, when Martin Luther King Jr. talked about the arc of justice, he said it's slow, but it tilts toward justice. And I believe that, you know, we can tilt the earth if we want to and if we work together.
Thanks.
Mentor 3 students, set up an alumni network.
Thank you, Phil. Wanda?
Organise across the whole country and globally, because we are a global majority. And unity.
Thank you. Shani?
Well, all that went before, I would ask that you think about your organisations, your organisational preparedness. I would ask that you put in support structures. I would ask that you invest properly in this work, and that you understand this is going to take years, so partnering with organisations over the long term. And I would also ask, please, to think about who you're passing your money on to. Diversify your supply chains to make sure that you are supporting those black-owned businesses.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking the panel for giving their time. Thank you very much. Can I also thank the Conduit team, without which this would not be possible. And thank you for coming. If you want to be part of our community, please come and talk to us. There's wine, water, juice, whatever you wish, at the back. We can chat for longer, and I hope you'll all come again to the next one. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Arvinda, for pulling this all together.